Today, solar jobs hang in the balance. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Welcome to Solar Works for Illinois. Today, my guest is the senior editor at Solar Power World. Welcome to the show, Kelsey Misbrener.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on the show, and it's with a heavy heart that I stand here today talking about solar jobs. It's such a double edge. We, of course, are riding a boom here in Illinois with the Future Energy Jobs Act, which funded, among other things, training programs for young professionals and career changers. And that program has been a huge success. So we're going to talk about that. But here we stand in the gulch of the coronavirus economic collapse. And that is also playing a major role now in our economy. And then there's the double whammy of the solar coaster, which is very real here in Illinois. We have a funding cliff happening. So let's get into it. You wrote a wonderful story a couple of weeks ago in Solar Power World about the success of job training programs. Recap that, if you would, for us.
Sure. So a study in 2019 found that 94% of eligible students found employment after completing Illinois' renewable energy job training programs that were created by the state's Future Energy Jobs Act. So, and it found that trainees landed roles all throughout the solar spectrum, from solar installation, sales, inspection, desk jobs, boots on the roof jobs, everywhere in between. So it really showed that there was a huge demand for solar workers in 2019. I'm not sure what that might look like in 2020, but definitely green jobs are an important, new, and growing field that people of all walks of life need to have access to.
Absolutely. And we do have 50 years of pure growth ahead of us in the renewable energy industry. Society is making the transition. These transitions take decades, but we now see with the 2035 report, with the Joe Biden platform, which is basically a Green New Deal, we can make the transition to a 90% clean grid, for example, by 2035 with existing technology at no greater cost to society. And it's going to benefit us with clean, well-paying jobs, cleaner air, and a more vibrant economy. So it's a win-win-win. But so let's talk a little more about that. I mean, if you were casting about for a career 2 years ago, and you stumbled upon one of these career fairs that ICEA, the Illinois Solar Energy Association, was hosting, that Grid Alternatives was organizing, and that the IBEW was recruiting to, and got into job training, you were a very lucky person, because there is a huge opportunity here in Illinois and the Midwest for people to become skilled labor or workers. It's not just electricians and laborers doing the field work, but it's also engineers and salespeople and data analysts and back office and finance. And so there's all kinds of people needed in our industry, and it's growing by leaps and bounds. And, we had 250,000 people in the industry prior to March of 2020, and then the wheels came off. But what do you credit the success of the job training programs here in Illinois to?
I mean, I think that educating people on how good and how well-paying these solar jobs are is a huge step in bringing more people into the field, and showing stats like that almost all eligible students found employment. I know that 2020 has really hit the solar market, but I think by this point, most states are opened up again, and solar is considered an essential service by the Department of Homeland Security. So people should be mostly back to work by now. So this should be a very temporary thing. And people should not be put off by what happened this year. They should definitely continue to seek out solar job opportunities and solar training opportunities to get really good, well-paying jobs, especially as we approach the general election in November, where we've got Democratic candidate Joe Biden with a hugely robust plan to reach 8 million rooftop and community solar systems by 2035. And he also specifically addresses the need for making these jobs available to everyone, meaning low income, underrepresented populations, and people who will possibly be out of the job as fossil fuel industries continue to retire and shrink.
Yeah, there's all these things going on. Renewables are growing, and we're really just coming into a period of very rapid acceleration in the renewables industry. It's starting to mature. The cost adoption curve is continuing to get sweeter. Solar prices have come down 90% in the last 10 years. And so it is now affordable, and the ROI is compelling in many markets. Here in Illinois, we have a payback period of 4 to 6 years, including the incentives that we have through FEJA, which are hanging in the balance now. Those are renewable energy credits that require a small fee on our power bill, which is then collected by the utility and paid out to system owners. And it truly changes the game for system owners. And then that trickles down to all of the people that are needed to make that happen and build that infrastructure. At the end of the day, these are infrastructure jobs. These are construction related jobs. And we're transforming the built environment, right? Today, rooftops are just sitting there protecting our buildings. Tomorrow, they're also making power for those buildings, helping us to approach net zero.
It's interesting that you point out how closely related the solar industry is to construction fields. I worked on a story a couple of years ago about how allied industries to solar are a great place to seek out solar workers. When people are trained in construction already, they know how it works, boots on the ground, working every day. They can easily transfer those skills into solar. So that's a great opportunity for expanding someone's skill set and bringing more people into the solar industry.
Definitely. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the nitty-gritties of solar installations. You can have a high school education and then get into a training program and become a solar installer. Let's just talk about installers, for example. And some of those are high-skilled electricians, and some of them are less skilled laborers. But so there's a spectrum. But you're probably looking at twice minimum wage right out of the gate as a young professional becoming a solar installer. And then, in the IBEW, for example, that's the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. That's the most popular electrical union here in the Midwest. Those electricians make really good money. And yes, it's a 5-year training program. You learn all types of skills. And so if solar is the thing for you, you can then choose to pursue that. But if there's other types of electrical construction that you'd rather do, then you're well positioned. So it's amazing that you can get such a leg up so quickly. I think of retail workers, many of whom also just have a high school education, and you're really just stuck. There's a ceiling there that it's going to be difficult for you to transcend. Whereas in solar, you will continue to gain experience and responsibility, and you're going to have a very lucrative and successful career. You may have to move. That's the bad news. And we were talking about this, 90% of the students that got into the training programs here, or 94% of the students that got into the training program here in Illinois found jobs, and they're busy this year. Here we are in the summer of 2020, we're booming. Here at Continental, we're almost doubling year over year. Our commercial industrial installations, the residential installers are super busy and growing. But next year is a different tune. We have a lack of incentives available in the market. And unless we get additional legislation like the Path to 100, which will free up more resources to incentivize solar installations. So in 2021, if without additional legislation, there will be layoffs. There will be people having to relocate. But the industry is not going to shrink everywhere. It's going to be regional. And I don't know, when you think about the national picture, Kelsey, is Illinois typical in this regard of this? We have this expression, the solar coaster, where you get an incentive program, it generates, tremendous growth, and then that tails off for a period of time, and then it comes back. Minnesota went through this, I believe. They're 5 years ahead of us. I don't know. In California, it just seems like that industry is now truly mature, and everybody wants solar. Everybody wants solar and storage for a variety of reasons, and it's just pure growth. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Solar is definitely right now, in the absence of national leadership and standards, solar is almost completely dictated by state and local policies. But I'm very curious to see what might happen if Joe Biden is the next president and these solar goals are set at the national level. So I think that the market could be less volatile when there is that national leadership, national support for solar, and national education of residents about what solar can do for their homes, for their businesses, for their utilities.
Yeah. You mentioned utilities, and the utilities are driving massive growth in the solar industry right now, among other things. They're just one major force because, as I was discussing on the Clean Power Hour, a segment that I've started here on Solar Works for Illinois with John Weaver, so many coal assets, these are coal burning power plants, are 50 plus years old. And so they're non-economical. They're just expensive. They're also very dirty. And that brings up the just transition, right? Because there are thousands or hundreds of thousands of workers in the coal energy industry. We've already seen the collapse of coal mining. Several major coal mining companies have gone bankrupt. And now that's going to trickle into the energy, the utility side, right? People that are running those power plants are going to have to find a transition into wind, solar, and storage. And luckily, many of those skills will translate, right? If you can run a coal plant, if you can maintain a coal plant, you can maintain a solar plant or a wind science. But you have to be intentional about it, and we have to be careful that people don't fall through the cracks, and that training plays a great role. And we see that with education, right? The government has an important role to play in education. It really transforms society from purely agrarian to a much more diverse manufacturing economy and then a service economy, because we have free public education K through 12, right? Mm-hmm. It's available theoretically for everybody. If you live in the United States, you can get a high school education, right?
Yep.
And so that is a very important role for government, and that's where even though FIJA is private dollars. For example, the incentives are being collected by from ratepayers on your power bill. There's a 2% fee that then funds RECs, that then funds the training program. But without that legislation, we don't have a training program.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the role of government, to really create the platform for us to then stand up and stand upon.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing that COVID has done that could be seen as a positive is bring a lot of these trainings online. So it doesn't matter where people are, they could get solar training if they have an internet connection. So I think that this could really increase access for those people who might be transitioning out of fossil fuel jobs, or anyone else who's underrepresented, may not have a car to get to trainings, may not even live close to a training center. So I'm excited to see what might evolve as far as online training.
Yeah, I think certain types of jobs lend themselves to virtual training. I mean, an electrician can learn a lot virtually, but then there's also the need for that face-to-face, hands-on training. So it's a both and.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, luckily we do have the technology, and we're really just we're on the precipice of a much greater virtual learning environment across society, I think. And we're not even leveraging virtual reality much yet, but that will come into play as well. The ability to kind of navigate a construction site virtually will be there. I mean, it is there, it's just not widely available. Mm-hmm. And get your feet wet and understand, this is how a solar array works. These are the parts and pieces. This is, the things that you have to be conscious of when regarding safety and so forth. You mentioned Joe Biden's plan for 8 million solar rooftops. We passed the 2 million rooftop mark in 2019 here in the U.S. And that was an amazing watermark. So now we're talking about a quadrupling, and that's totally necessary and totally doable. I'm having Julian Spector with GTM on the show next week to talk about the 2035 report. That's a second segment I'm doing on the 2035 report out of Berkeley that just plainly shows how this is totally doable. It is an investment, but you look at the highway system, right? We didn't get a highway system without a major investment by the government. And then that opens up the arteries for private industry to expand. It created the suburbs, it created retail shopping malls and so much opportunity. And that's exactly what a Green New Deal is going to do. Mm-hmm. So $3 trillion, right? That's what they're talking about spending on infrastructure. And I don't know if that truly fixes all of our almost broken infrastructure, like bridges, for example, which are in disrepair across the U.S. Mm-hmm. But it's a good start, and of course then there's the backdrop of climate change and the urgency that we really have to decarbonize our economy. And like I said before, it's such a win-win-win. It's going to create jobs, it's going to clean the air, it's going to improve human health, it's going to improve the economy, and we need that right now, right? The economy is so hurting, and in the pre-show we were discussing Corona. I don't want to be naive about that. There's an economic collapse before our eyes happening, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. And tough times are ahead. The beauty of renewables is that they are a shining light. We just need to head for the light.
We've heard from some contractors that people are even more motivated, residential customers, because they want to know that they can keep their power on. We've kind of seen that the government has dropped the ball on a major 100-year pandemic where there's not enough testing to go around. So people are turning to solar to add some reliability and safety for their families. So there's new motivations to go solar during this also.
Yes. Resiliency and independence are so important, and our society is so brittle in so many ways. It's now that we have solar and batteries, there's really nothing stopping us, except it does take money. It's not accessible to just anybody, which is why things like community solar are so important. And Solar Works for All. We have a low-income solar program here in Illinois, which encourages construction in low-income communities, on brownfields, and hiring disadvantaged workers. All of that is very good and necessary. I would argue that program needs to be more funded. Low-income programs are a very important piece of this puzzle. And I haven't drilled down on the Biden report. When you think of job training, is enough of this training focused on low-income populations?
I will definitely be curious to see his specific details about reaching underrepresented and underemployed populations. I didn't see explicit detail yet, but I know he's working with the Sanders campaign, and Sanders campaign is very closely tied to the Sunrise movement. So I'm sure that they will drill down on those details as the election gets closer.
Yeah. Well, what else should we talk about regarding job training and renewable energy, Kelsey?
I mean, I just think the policy standpoint is super important. Like you said, funding is really number one for this. Making solar training part of college and community college, high school special programs that students can opt into to really just like get their feet wet, see if this is an industry that they're interested in. That would be huge. Expanding solar generally onto schools, onto colleges, to give people firsthand experience with solar and show them it's a booming industry is hugely important for the educational aspect. So just more exposure is important.
I'm glad you mentioned high school, because I think high school is a huge missed opportunity in the United States. We've largely shuttered the trades in schools. Germany has done this right. They still have very robust training programs for teenagers to get exposure to the construction trades. And when you think of just the built environment that children are in, it's such an opportunity to teach them about construction. You're going to a building every day, a commercial building that has plumbing, it has electrical, it has a roof, it has a grid connected system. And it's such a learning opportunity right there. The classroom, the building can be the classroom, and we're not doing that. And we need to, because these are good paying jobs, and we are making the transition, and it takes a huge workforce. We're going to triple the grid in the coming decades. We need many, many hundreds of thousands and millions of workers to get into the energy industry. And for 4 years, we have them captive in the classroom, and largely we're not exposing them to the construction industry. I'm so sad about that. And maybe this will be a turning point for us to recapture that. And in Norway, my two sons live in Norway. Children basically make a decision when they're 13 or 14 if they're going to pursue uh, you know knowledge work or the trades. And um, then they get much more in-depth experience as a young adult. In the US, we tend to make that decision 3 or 4 years later, post high school. And by that time, then you're faced with so many harsh realities of, well, I need to make a living. If I'm not going to college, and then what are your options?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't
Yeah.
know if, I did have a question for you. When you look around the country at different markets, for example, New Jersey is in a transition right between programs, but it's basically a very lucrative market for solar developers and installers right now. Is solar training ahead of where we are here in the Midwest?
I know there's a lot of nonprofit organizations working on these issues, and I would say they're the leaders of this. I know Vote Solar is very involved in New Jersey, making sure that there's environmental justice as far as solar training there. So I think that the training programs are largely led by nonprofits like Grid Alternatives or Vote Solar in a lot of states.
I'm glad you mentioned Vote Solar. I'm going to have Vote Solar on the show. Both John Delury and Will Kenworthy are going to come on the show here in the coming months. They're a national nonprofit that really supports clean energy legislation, and we so need that work. It's tends to be very behind the scenes, and but we wouldn't have a vibrant industry here in Illinois without that work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're almost out of time, Kelsey. I really appreciate your time and your work at Solar Power World. What is on your radar looking forward? What are you excited about?
Well, me and my team are very curious about the new products that might be launching this year that we won't be able to see in person at SPI. So we're keeping an eye out. We want any companies to reach out to us about what they're coming out with. We're looking to see what clean energy support will be passed as far as COVID relief. So those are just the two main things we're keeping our eyes on right now.
Is SPI going to happen, do you think? I know they've reorganized the event, and they're saying they're going to hold it in Las Vegas in October, I believe.
Outside, yeah.
Yeah, be an outdoor event. But I think given the atmosphere in the United States right now, I can't see a lot of people going.
No, I don't think so. I hope that they have success, but I think a lot of people will be scared, including me.
And I heard that CED Green Tech is not sponsoring. And so, when a major supplier like that pulls out, you see the chink in the armor. And it's just a really tough time. I am a fan of virtual events. I've covered virtual conferences here on the show, and I think that it would be wonderful if they really leaned into that virtual experience, because that was a valuable experience going to the Midwest Expo virtually. I still made some good connections and attended some good sessions, and it's way more affordable and it's way safer. Mm-hmm. But you have to really lean in and work hard at making it a success. The technology is not quite there. So you have to hire an army of technologists and concierge workers to hold people's hands.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, hopefully I'll see you at a virtual SPI this fall, Kelsey.
Yeah.
Kelsey Misbrener, senior editor with Solar Power World. Thank you so much. And please check us out on YouTube, SolarWorks for Illinois. Please subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up. Comment. Tell us what you want to hear about. We would love to hear from our listeners on what topics you want to hear. Thanks and have a great day, Kelsey.
Thank you, Tim. See you later.